Welcome to Engaging Culture, a podcast presented by Bridgeway Christian Church. I'm Brian Kiley. Today, I'm joined by Bridgeway's new young adults pastor, Pastor Judah Sanders. Pastor Judah and I are going to talk about health and fitness and how our spiritual health is connected to our physical health. We'll share our own stories of the difference physical fitness has made in our lives, and we'll talk about some biblical principles that can inspire health and some motivators that work and some that don't. All of that and more on this episode of Engaging Culture. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 7 of the Engaging Culture podcast. Pastor Brian with you, joined by, as I mentioned in the open, the newest member of Bridgeway's pastoral team, Pastor Judah Sanders. Judah, thanks for coming on with me.
Yeah, super excited to be here, to have some good conversation.
Yes, and we're going to be talking about a subject that is close to both of our hearts, that being physical fitness and health and sort of the connection between that in our spiritual lives. But man, I know you've been hearing this a lot, but we're so excited to have you on the team. And you've been really it's funny, these first few weeks we're just taking every opportunity we can to get you in front of people, and so that our congregation and our listeners can get to know you. But man, I think this is just another kind of fun opportunity to hear a little bit of your story and hear some of your heart. So I'm excited for the conversation that we're going to have today.
Man, I am too. I have just really been so heartened by the reception of the church and the way people have just embraced me as family, and all of the things that I'm learning and the ways that I'm growing. And I'm super excited to be able to have this conversation too, because like you said, fitness, health, wellness is just so important to me personally, but so important to all of us, right? Like just in the way we take care of ourselves. That's kind of critical to everything else that's going on in our lives. So
yeah, absolutely. So can you share a little bit of your story in sort of how did fitness and health become so important to you? Why is it so important, and how has it made a difference in your life?
yeah, so it's crazy because when I meet people for the first time today, they see me as I am now, and they, kind of assume that that's how my life has always been. But a year ago, I was over 300 pounds, morbidly obese, pre-diabetic, and just really, really not healthy. And it was this journey for me into health actually started as a mental health journey. I deal with functional depression, and that was really, really impacting my work, my relationships, my whole life. And at some point, I realized I just needed help. And so I started to get help. I started to get therapy and support. And that led to an examination of the ways that I cope, the ways that I try to manage my stress and my insecurity and my pain and those things. And one of those ways was food. And so at some point, my therapist and I started to really consider what would it look like if I had other coping strategies that weren't food? What would it look like if I included physical movement into my lifestyle? And so that started the journey. And since then, I've lost over 100 pounds. I don't know exactly the amount. I'm terrible at math, but I was at 317 at my highest weight. Today, I vacillate between 203 and 207, trying to get down to 200, glory to God. And so that's kind of been my journey, is figuring out like what works for me and what doesn't work for me, and how to be as healthy as I can be. And, I know for you, Pastor Brian, I believe I heard you say you were an athlete, and you're a fitness enthusiast. Tell me what's it been like for you? What's your journey?
Yeah, see, the funny thing is sort of my connection with health and fitness kind of comes from the other direction, whereas I, all growing up, was like the skinny, scrawny kid who, like, I've always loved sports. I've always participated in athletics. I was never very good at anything. I played tennis, and I ran cross country in high school. So, like if you're a scrawny, skinny kid who wants to play sports, like those are two good places to go. And a lot of sort of my desire to be fit and to be strong and to be active came from sort of this background of being the kid who couldn't do a pull-up, being the kid who couldn't do a push-up, being the kid who was slow, and all of that stuff. And it's been funny kind of to me as I sort of got older, became a teenager, into college and beyond, just the impact that I found that physical health has had on so many other elements of my well-being. And then I think also just the way that my interests are, I just tend to be pretty active by nature. So a day laying on the beach just is not that exciting to me, whereas a day climbing a mountain is very exciting. And I think, over the course of my life, whether it's, being, a 20-year-old guy who really wanted to be, super strong in the weight room and doing all that, to being, now in my 30s, I don't really care about that anymore, but I love to climb mountains. I love to get outside and be active. I love to play sports. I, just did my first Spartan race. I've run a marathon. I've climbed Mount Whitney. I've gone to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Like, I've done all that stuff. And if I'm not doing it, I'm thinking about what my next adventure is going to be. And then also just, I don't know, the goal setting element of that, whether it's, man, I want to train for a race. Or I want to get down to a certain weight, or I want to be able to complete a certain number of repetitions. Those things are just very motivating and exciting to me. And I just, and I know you would relate to this as well, that, man, when I'm physically healthy and when I'm moving my body, it just impacts so many other areas of my life. How have you seen that to be true for you just in your journey over the course of the last year?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it started off as a mental health journey, and seeing the ways that physical health, that nutrition, and that fitness impact my mental health has actually been quite astounding. There's so much research out there that talks about how what we eat impacts, the way our brains develop and function, our serotonin levels, right, which is our happy hormones, and even all of the research just around gut bacteria, right? What we eat impacts our gut biome, and that regulates so much in our minds and our bodies. And so for me personally, the manageability of my depression is directly linked to how I'm eating. So much so now that literally I can eat a cinnamon roll. I love cinnamon rolls. They're God's glorious creation, or perhaps a result of the fall. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but one of those two.
The point is, right. So I can eat a cinnamon roll on Monday, and Tuesday I'm gonna have a really hard day. I'm gonna be sluggish. I'm gonna be slow. I'm gonna be very, very cranky, moody. And not able to process as logically. I function more out of my emotions after I eat something like that. And so that's huge to me, that connection. For you, are you seeing and experiencing something similar in terms of what you eat and how active you are and how you feel?
Yeah. So eating, I wouldn't say I'm able to draw that clear of a line, but certainly there is didn't need that extra handful of Cheetos, like that sort of mentality that I think we can all relate to. Didn't need that extra slice of garlic bread. Yeah. Speaking specifically of dinner last night. But I think for me, certainly the body movement component and mental health is huge. I mean, I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I certainly, can sort of dip my toe in the depression pond a little bit as well. And I find a very clear connection. And there's, like you said, there's tons of research to back this up. A very clear connection between my mood and how much I've been moving my body. So I even find, like, if I'm getting stuck, if I'm getting antsy, if I find myself getting restless, it's like, all right, just go out and take a walk. Like, I live in a neighborhood where it's like I've sort of scouted it out. Like, this is a 10-minute loop. This is a 15-minute loop. This is a 20-minute loop. And just get out, move my body, maybe, bring something to read. Like, I'm a weirdo. I bring my iPad and read while I walk and just set the font really big. But, like, get out and do that, or listen to something as I'm doing it. And man, does it make a difference. So, and I think that's, especially as we're living in this weird, like, pandemic era where so many of us are struggling with mental health in so many different ways. I think it's just really, really critical to say, what are the tools that we have at our disposal? And we don't all need to, run marathons, but just moving our body helps a lot more than I think a lot of us realize with just dealing with some of the mental health challenges that we're facing right now.
Well, and I think the really cool thing is that there are so many different ways to move our bodies, right? Like you really do have a lot of options. You were sharing with me yesterday, you like to do 400 push-ups. You set goals like that. That's ridiculous. And the rest of us humans won't do that. But if it's walking, if it's skating, if it's dancing, if it's stretching, I think that there are a lot of options in ways that we can kind of incorporate this movement of our bodies. And I think that just as a society, we always have to remember that movement has always been just important to humanity, and that, we all come from ancestors that, did things like have to hunt and have to be out, on a farm, cultivate a farm, and so there was just always this movement. And now we kind of live in this age where we're very still a lot. And particularly, as you pointed out, Pastor, in this COVID time, it's just been hard to get any of those kind of life-giving movement things in our lives without intention. And so I think we have to, on purpose, say, I'm going to include this. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And intention is the key part. And just to clarify, it is not 400 push-ups all at once. It is 400 push-ups spread over the course of the day. And yesterday, just so we're being
totally, it does not make it sound any better.
The goal yesterday was 400. I made it to 300, and there's grace for that. But let's talk a little bit about the connection between diet and exercise and spirituality. Now, there is, I think we all know this from being humans, there is so much just weird, like guilt and shame associated with diet, with exercise, with body image, and all of that. And we absolutely want to avoid any of that. Like, guilt and shame in general, I think, are just lousy motivators. They don't work. And again, there's just so much sensitivity around this when it comes to physical health and, again, with body image. So we want to be super clear that we're steering clear of that as far as we can. But with that, how can a desire to honor God inspire us to take good care of ourselves physically?
Yeah, well, I think that that's got to actually be the number one motivator, right? Is our desire to honor God, right? For a few reasons. One, we know that as believers, our bodies belong to God, right? And so with that comes this responsibility to take good care of what's God's. And again, staying away from shame and guilt and legalism, just that's the appropriate thing to do. If somebody paints this beautiful picture and gives it to you. I go to museums a lot. I love museums. And there are all of these things that they do with the air temperature and with the type of casing that something's in to take good care of it, to protect it, to keep it safe and well. And, we see this idea all throughout our New Testament text, this idea of like taking really good care of this creation that is you, that belongs to God. And, Paul told the Corinthian church in his first letter that, while all things are lawful, not all things are helpful. And so thinking about like, what is going to be helpful in me stewarding this gift that God has loaned me, that is me, right? We also know that gluttony is a sin. It's explicit in the Bible. And so in thinking about our relationship with food, and keeping in mind that the overindulgence of food, especially with the way the way we eat in kind of this Western America, that needs to be on the top of our mind. And I think finally, I know for me, it's really important that I try to be available to be useful to God, right? Mm-hmm. I believe that all of us have purpose, and God has intention for how we navigate this world to his glory. And so I just want to be able to do that well, right? Yeah. For me, I know that being really, really unhealthy did not give me a lot of capacity to care for people.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be able to do that. But also, just on a practical standpoint, maybe you're not a pastor or in professional ministry. You want to be available to run with your kids, and you want to
Yeah.
be available to run with your grandkids if you can. You want to feel good while doing these things, and not feeling good. You don't want that to be a barrier
Yeah.
to loving on your family, to engaging with your community, and to doing what God has called you to do. Um, for you, do you
Yeah.
see connections again between kind of your faith walk and your health journey?
Yeah, big time. I think that the word you used a minute ago that is so crucial is this word stewardship. That ultimately, every resource that
Mm,
God has given me is not mine. It is given to me on loan. It is something that I can steward either for my own purposes or for God's. And my body, just like everything else, I do that imperfectly, right? There are times where I use it for selfish purposes in various kinds of indulgence, and there are times where I can use it for the glory of God. Same with a physical possession, a house, a car, whatever the case may be. And I want to be clear that I think for a lot of us, different ones of us have things that impact our physical health that we have no control over, right? Like accidents happen, we have
right.
different genetic conditions or other things that we had no say in this. Certainly, I have had so many injuries over the years that have led to periods of not being very healthy physically. And there's just people get any one of us can get sick tomorrow, and then it's like, okay, well, there's only so much we can do. But I think that as long as we're
Right.
able, our physical bodies, like I said, and like you said a minute ago, are a stewardship. And I think for me, that's a powerful motivator to say, okay, God, you have given me this body to take care of. I want to do that to the best I can. And I think even you said a minute ago that when you're physically unhealthy, it interferes with your ability to care for people, and that's really true. That was something I remember hearing a pastor talk about a while ago that I'd never really thought about, was like the idea of being physically fit enough to minister to other people. I'm like, really? Like that? Like that's a thing? But you talk
Yeah.
about just the energy to be out and about and with people. You talk about preaching a sermon is a physically demanding thing. In fact, I wear my little Fitbit that I have on here, and it'll when I get done preaching, it gives me credit for 40 minutes of riding a stationary bike. That's what it thinks I'm doing. And
Okay.
so and I'll tell you what, this is really funny. I hadn't preached in a little while, and I was practicing a sermon downstairs in the high school room at Bridgeway recently, and I found myself getting physically tired preaching the sermon. I'm like, man, what is going on here?
Wow.
But again, like you said,
Yeah.
even if you're not a pastor, the ability to be physically active and present is huge. And then in other areas of your life, I mean, a huge inspiration for me, age 30 was when I made a lot of change, and I've always been decently healthy, but I made a lot of changes, age 30. I've been, I quit eating meat. I started doing a lot more cardio. I've just done a lot of different things. And a big inspiration to me in that process was a guy by the name of Rich Roll. And he's not a believer, but he wrote this book called Finding Ultra. And it was all about how like he is this like guy who got out of breath walking up the stairs, became one of the fittest people in the world. And that was a big inspiration for him, was realizing, man, I want to be around for my kids. I want to be able to do the best that I can for them. I want to be present. I want to
That's
play with
right.
them. I want to walk them down
That's
the
right.
aisle. And man, I think that's where, I don't know, physical health I'm inspired to keep myself healthy because of that element of, man, I want to be able to be out there and present and yeah, engage with my kids, engage with my community without, being tired all the time. And again, I want to be clear. Some of us, we deal with stuff that is beyond our control that prevents us from doing that. And God can use us in a
Right.
million other ways.
Right.
But if we're healthy enough to take care of ourselves, man, that to me is pretty inspiring. And I'd imagine you'd agree.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think that I watched somebody die about 2 months before I really started taking my health journey seriously.
Wow.
Somebody who was in the church that I was ministering to that I loved a lot, an older gentleman, and he died from things that absolutely were outside of his control, right?
Yeah.
Some health issues. But these health issues were so exacerbated by lifestyle choices that he made that made the death so much more painful.
Right.
so much more difficult, caused his family a lot of grief. And there's no shame, in what I'm trying to say. But watching that for me made me just really, really aware of how impactful my choices actually are. And I
Yeah.
think that that was kind of one of the first times where, as a younger person, especially, we believe we're invincible.
Sure.
Um, and it was one of just the first opportunities where I saw that literally what I eat, how I take care of myself, even beyond just food and fitness, right? Like making sure that I get enough sleep, drinking water, right? That these things really do have consequences for
Yeah.
later in my life. And
Yeah.
fortunately, it's been such a blessing, but I served in a church that had a decent amount of folks who were older in age. And so I got to see the spectrum of what being old can look like. And so I know people that are, I'm serious. I know people who are in their 70s who go mountain climbing,
Yeah.
literally, right? And I know people who are in their 50s who have some other health challenges. And so for me, just such a big motivator is the reality that I want to live until I die. You
Yeah.
understand? I
Amen.
want to be
Amen.
healthy enough that when I do die, I want to be surprised I died. I want to get to heaven and, well, Lord, I thought we'll go down there and turn off the stove. I was cooking. I wasn't planning on doing this. That's really
Yeah.
what I want.
Yeah.
And so much of that is these everyday choices that we
Yeah,
make.
no, you're certainly right about that. It's funny you mentioned that, and I live here in Lincoln. I live right near Sun City, Lincoln, and that's where my parents live. So in pre-COVID times, I spend a fair amount of time over there, and I meet a lot of my parents' friends. And my parents are both pretty active. And I remember one guy in particular who I'd gotten to know him pretty well. He's a believer, used to be a pastor. Like we talk, and he and I would play pickleball together. And we talk about ministry and different things. And I remember my dad just casually mentioning, oh yeah, so and so at this like senior athletic competition set a record in like the high jump for age 75 and older. And I said, there is no way that guy is 75 years old. Like he looks like he's, in his 50s, maybe 60s, right? And I'm like, man, people like that inspire me. Like, okay, if you're
That's
still,
right.
first of all,
That's right.
setting high jump records at age 75, like you're doing something right there. But you see the other end of the spectrum as well, like you said. And again, no guilt, no shame, but it's like, man, these choices are significant and they have consequences, and I just want to be mindful of that.
Right.
Now, we've talked a bunch about how there's all sorts of ways our thoughts about physical health and body image can go sideways and get to a pretty negative place, and we don't want to encourage that at all. So I want to ask you, how do we balance sort of loving ourselves as we are, being confident in who we are, while at the same time maybe desiring to get healthier, but being motivated not by guilt and shame, but by something that's healthier than that? How do we balance those things?
Certainly. Yeah, I think that there are a couple of things that are really important. One of them we already talked about, and that's just that our desire for health and for wellness has to be funneled from the core belief that we belong to God, right? But
Okay.
also from a belief of what God says about us, right? Especially because, as you have noted, there are a lot of other things that we have to consider in our health journey, including genetics, including whatever kind of health things that we have that are kind of independent or less dependent on how we eat and how we exercise.
Yeah.
Just our features, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember in this journey, I have had to like just make peace with the fact that like I'm a big dude. No amount of running is going to change it. I'm tall, I'm broad, like I'm a big dude. And
Yeah.
that's always been challenging for me. And so when we start to really believe what it is that God says about us, that he says that you are his master workmanship, that he says that you are the head and not the tail, that he says that you are above and not beneath, that you are his child, that you're not condemned. When we start to believe and lean into these things, then our health journey is not about a vanity project, right? Our health journey is not a comparison project, and it gives us space to do something like we did, where I'm going to tease you and talk trash because you do 400 push-ups, and if I can get to 50 in a day, I'm very proud of myself, because I recognize that my value is not in my fitness. My value is inherent, right?
Yeah.
The things that God says about me are true, no matter what I look like, no matter how my health is. And so my effort to be healthy is an effort to honor my God, right? It is an act of worship, right? It is an act of me being intentional about trying to be the Imago Dei, about trying to really reflect the image of God. And so, sure, this means eating healthy and exercising, but it gets to include other things like managing my stress and my emotional health. And I think that what's so critical to us as believers, our journey with health, is inviting God fully into that journey, right? That's how we achieve balance, because I think that there are a lot of things that we think are mundane or not innately spiritual. And so we don't invite God into those things. If we're struggling with drugs or alcoholism, we'll invite God into that. But also to invite God into your journey, right, with
Yeah.
health, and to ask Him to help you be balanced with those things. I think is critical to the balance.
Yeah. No,
so, for you, how does that show up?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think just to give an analogy, so you and I have not had a chance to talk about if you're even familiar with the Enneagram, but I identify as an Enneagram 7. So it's the enthusiast. So I love new experiences. I always want to go do something fun. I want to, and that is behind so many of my interests, whether it's sports or just activities and getting out and doing stuff. And man, I'm constantly thinking about what's my next adventure, what's my next new thing I'm going to try, what's my next. I cannot overstate how frequent of a thought this is in my mind. And something that I've had to remind myself is adventures and fun stuff and all this stuff. Like, it's all great. It's all good. It's all wonderful, but it'll never be enough, because there's always something else.
Wow.
There's always something else. So I have to put those things in their proper place to say, whatever the next hike I'm going to do is, whatever the next trip I'm going to take is, whatever the next event is, let's enjoy it for what it is. But let's know there's never something I can do where I can say, man, that's enough. I don't need to do, I don't have this desire to do more things. So the analogy that I want to draw is, I think that fitness and health is a little bit similar in that if you rely on it for your identity, it'll never be enough. There's always somebody fitter than you. There's always someone faster. You can always lose a little bit more weight. You can always gain a little bit more muscle. You could always make your time a little bit faster. You can always do a few more reps. It'll never be enough. So you have to get to the place where you say, no, what makes me enough is not how many pull-ups I can do, or is not my 5K time. What makes me enough is that I'm made in the image of God. And that I'm not pursuing health as a way to prove myself or a way to validate myself. I'm doing it as an act of worship, which means it is an expression of my love for God. But whatever the scale says, whatever the time says, however many reps I do, that does not change my fundamental identity as a child of God, so that then I can pursue health, like I said, not out of a place of seeking identity, because I think so many people, and Christians can be susceptible to this, so many people, their identity is in their physical health and their physical appearance. And much like the analogy I gave with, events and experiences, it'll never be enough if it's your identity. It'll never be enough.
That's right.
When it's not your identity, I don't know, the way, this is maybe a little bit silly, but the way I think about it is my physical health is like a fun project, okay, I'm just trying to be healthy, and we'll just see how we can do. Yeah. And that way, when I'm unhealthy, now maybe that might inspire me to, okay, eating too much pizza, gotta maybe cut back on that.
All right.
But there's there's not this this guilt and shame component in there as well. So I just think that's where we need to be really careful, is just to put this in their proper place.
And I'll add that I think that this is why language is so critical, right? And this is why I think that the language that we have to have about our journeys is some sort of, I'm taking good care of myself. I'm taking steps toward taking good care of myself. Yes, that includes losing weight. Yes, maybe that includes getting toned. Yes, maybe that includes a particular way of eating. But again, this is me trying to live into the fullest expression of me being the image of God. And that language just really, I think, shapes how we approach kind of our health things in ways I think are more healthy uh, than just saying, oh, I'm trying to be fit, or I'm trying to be thin, or I'm trying to be attractive. And those things aren't even bad things, but they have to, I think, yield to a greater purpose, as you have expressed. Because what they don't tell you about losing weight is that you're still insecure after. If you've been a bigger person like me, I was bigger most of my life. There was this, I had these ideas about what being healthy, what being fit would do for me. You still deal with insecurity. You still deal with body image issues. You still deal with you being imperfect and not always feeling great. And so again, there has to be more substance than just the vanity piece of it.
Yeah, we have to know where to go to deal with that insecurity. That's to Jesus, not to
Yeah.
our body image or whatever the case may be. Um, let's talk for a minute about barriers to getting healthy. Certainly, I've experienced some. Certainly, you've experienced some. What do you see as some of the barriers that make it difficult to
Mm.
maintain some semblance of health? I know, like again, you have and I have to some degree as well been sort of all over the place on the health spectrum, and we've experienced different things. What makes it tough for you to stay healthy?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think one, there is so much information out
Yeah,
about health. A lot of it is conflicting, even among the experts, so to speak. There's conflicting information, and that's really overwhelming when you're starting. What do I do? How do I do it? What's going to work and what's not going to work? That's been a real barrier, and I think that can be a barrier for a lot of people. And I think one of the ways that we combat that barrier is that we get help, right? We invite some folks who are further along in their journey, who have expertise in this, to be a part of our journey and help us navigate that. But I also think that there is just the reality of access, money, and convenience being a barrier. Healthy food is expensive. And
yeah,
not just that, somebody was saying, well, you can get a bag of apples for the same price that you get for a McDonald's meal. And it's like, that's true, or a bag of potatoes. That's true. But like, also, if you haven't been taught how to cook potatoes, what do I do with potatoes?
yeah.
And sure, some of us on here are saying, well, everybody knows how to cook potatoes, but
Yeah.
that's an assumption, right? How do you cook asparagus?
And
What
it
what
takes
what
longer.
do you do?
Time, time's an issue,
Correct,
right? Yeah,
correct. All of those are real barriers. And again, we live in a culture that has kind of this right away mindset.
yeah,
So I think for me, one of the barriers was just the amount of time that it took for me to see results, to feel results. I'm a very right now, and that can be a barrier. And finally, I'll just add one more. There is the grief of not being able to do your same rhythms. For
mm,
27 out of the 28 years of my life, I ate a certain way. I ate for comfort. I had a rhythm. I mean, I know how I like my McDouble from McDonald's. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Um, and so to have to grieve putting that down, even though it was for my good, and even though on this side of it, I'm like, I can't believe I used to eat some things that I used to eat, or that I didn't exercise or whatever. There's a real emotional processing that has to happen, as you're saying. Okay, so when I'm sad or when I'm just low in energy, my go-to is no longer sugar. Uh, that's challenging. For you, Pastor, where are you seeing barriers to just like maintaining your health and wellness?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly relate to a lot of what you talked about. I think we need to be just honest about the fact that, like, I mean, and you certainly know this to be true. Weight loss is really hard, and try as we might to, yeah, right. Try as we might, like, no matter how many TV ads you watch or how, like, it is just, it's like, yes, I realize there are different things we could do, but at the end of the day, weight loss is a math problem, right? You got to burn more calories than you consume, and it's hard. I just genetically, I'm a relatively thin person, so have not really had a lot of time in my life where I have intentionally tried to lose weight. But about a year and a half ago, I hadn't exercised in a while. I saw a number on the scale I'd never seen before, and I'm like, nope, we are moving in a wrong trajectory here. Like, and I made an effort to lose 15 pounds. And I consider myself a pretty disciplined person, but it was hard. Like, anybody who tells you losing weight is not hard is trying to sell you something, and they're selling you something that's not going to work, right? And so I think we just need to be honest about that. And you mentioned it a minute ago that it's a process, right? And ultimately, if something is going to be sustainable, we have to be willing to sort of work the process and play the long game. Certainly our sedentary society, like you said, especially now, like, I find it's interesting. So much of what is lost for me in my life is just the walk into the car, is the parking and walking into a grocery store or whatever, these types of just incidental move, running a soccer practice, things where I would have this kind of incidental movement that now that's, now that's lost. But I think also, just to sort of, the flip side of that is, I think I forget where I was just talking about this. Maybe it was with you yesterday when we were preparing for this episode. But a big principle in my life is things are weird until they're not. And I think that sometimes we sell ourselves a little bit short in our ability to make changes. And I'm not preachy about this at all. And people like Pastor Lance make fun of me for this. But like, as I mentioned, I've been a vegetarian for 8 years. And before I became a vegetarian,
I'm so sorry.
I know, pray for me. The idea of not eating meat was just absolutely insane to me. And it felt weird for about 3 months. But then, and the plan was to only do it for about 3 months. I just started it as like, I'm turning 30. We're going to just try this out and see how it goes for 3 months. And after 3 months, it wasn't weird anymore. And I loved the way that I felt. So I just continued with it, right? In the same manner, exercising regularly is weird until it's not. Getting up and going for a walk is weird until it's not. Cleaning up your diet. And listen, even though I'm a I eat too much cheese pizza, okay? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm this like clean eating machine. And our kids' way department will tell you that I have a sweet tooth and I'm constantly stealing treats from their office. But I think that, again, we sell ourselves short because, it's hard on day 1. It's hard on day 2. It's hard on day 14. Okay. We are amazingly adaptable creatures. And if we can stay I don't know, I used to drink soda all the time. And now, like, the thought of having a soda is not even appealing to me. Just it doesn't even cross my mind that, maybe I'll drink a soda today. Like, that's just the furthest thing from my mind. We can develop new habits if we're willing to stay the course. And I'd imagine that in the course of your journey, you've seen that to be true in some different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, Pastor. We don't believe that we can. And I know that for me, I remember that so much of, especially in the gym, in terms of my exercise, so much of what sustained me when I was tired, and still does to this day, is that I've done it before. So I know I can. And that just shift of like, I can, has been huge. I also think that there's a bit of this that we have to be okay with being uncomfortable. And that was a huge kind of shift in my brain, is when I stopped trying to make the gym feel good. Now, that doesn't mean, don't get me wrong, I think that you got to do what works for you in terms of your physical fitness and your diet. But like, when I just was like, no, like push-ups are hard.
This is gonna hurt a little bit.
Like there's no way. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just a part of it. And when that became okay for me, when that became normal for me, a lot of things stopped being barriers, right?
Yeah.
So now, like, I'm at a point where, like, literally, there is nothing physically that I don't believe I can do. No, that's not true, right? Like, if we did 400 push-ups together, like, I would die. But the point is, like, my mindset is like, oh, like, no, legitimately, I can do it. I can get this done. And so I think that just like really, really believing that that you can, being okay with it being uncomfortable and having a plan for it, right? So not just like, oh, it's going to be hard to change my diet, or it's going to be hard to do whatever kind of physical movement that I'm doing, but like, what's my plan for getting through that?
Yeah.
What's my plan for cravings? What is my plan? I have what's called I call them ice foods, right? So these are my plans for when I'm craving really bad. What can I go to that I don't have to feel bad about? And what can I eat in public? Like if we're going somewhere and like we're going for lunch, where are my places, right? What can I order? How can I have plans for these things? And I think that part is pretty crucial too.
Yeah.
And I'll add just one more thing, if that's okay. Just the only other thing that I want to add is that I think that there has to be a grace that we have for ourselves as we're on this journey. And you alluded to this earlier, that this is a marathon, right? This is a whole life movement, a forever type of thing. And we're going to need grace, especially considering the reality that we live in a world that is not set up for us to be healthy. Right? Like the world. And so as you're on your journey, when you stumble, because you will, when you eat the pizza, when you, whatever, like whatever the ways that you don't hit your target on time the way you want to, that's the time to be really, really kind to yourself and say, you know what? And we're gonna keep trying and keep pushing. And I'm really proud of you, self, just for the fact that you are putting forth effort in these ways.
Yeah. And we know, and there's tons of research on this, that if we let ourselves go to the shame place, oh man, I ate the pizza. Oh man, I did this, I did that. Shame causes us to engage in behaviors that reinforce our shame, right? So it only is going to make things, only going to make things worse. I think something that you said that is really important is you talked about how we have to kind of get used to being uncomfortable, and that is certainly true. I want to sort of present a little bit of a different angle though as well. That this is not to contradict that point, because I agree. Like, exercise is inherently uncomfortable, and so is eating healthy. So I'm in no way questioning that. But I think also you got to figure out what works for you and what's fun. Like in pre-COVID times, I just sort of, I was okay with the fact that, like, okay, I'm just trying to be healthy. I'm not trying to be an ultra marathoner. I'm not trying to be like the world's fittest human. So for me, what got me out of bed in the morning at, insanely early times was, okay, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do the elliptical for about 45 minutes. And I'm going to bring my iPad and I'm going to read something that is life-giving to me. And I'm just going to get a little sweat on and like whatever. And then when I'm done, I'll do some push-ups, pull-ups, a little bit of weights, and listen to something that's uplifting and fun. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I look forward to that. That can get me out of bed. If I had said, and even though I generally like to run, but if I said, okay, I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to just run 8 miles, like, I'm not going to do that. Or I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to do some, like I'm going to get out of bed and do some workout thing on my computer where I have to pay attention to somebody yelling at me through the screen. Like, I'm just not going to do that. Like, just no thanks. I'll keep sleeping. So I think we have to figure out what works for us, what is fun, what's engaging. And I think, man, you talk about the connection between physical health and mental health, physical health and spiritual health. Yeah. Man, I think that I'll read scripture on my iPad when I exercise. I'll listen to worship music, or I'll listen to a sermon. Like, this can be a time where I'm receiving spiritual input that's uplifting, that's connecting me to God. And that's just all the more reason why I end up looking forward to that time. And I end up being willing to wake up earlier or adjust my schedule around it, as opposed to it being this like, oh man, got to go to the gym today thing. I think there are ways we can figure out, man, what what works for me, what's fun and engaging and enjoyable, as opposed to it just being sheer drudgery, right?
I think you're right, and I think that that's absolutely the truth, and I think that we're actually that's one of the ways that we're really blessed, just kind of as a society and in this time period, is that there are so many ways and methods for you to become healthier, to take your steps, right, in terms of your fitness, in terms of your diet, and I think that some of that, and this just needs to kind of be at the back of your mind, right, as you're trying to figure out what that looks like. Some of that is trial and error, right?
Sure.
And I think the important part is just to understand that, like, if you encounter something that doesn't work for you, that's not the time to quit. That's the time to reconsider, right? To say,
Yeah.
okay, well, what else is there? Whether it's dancing or walking or whatever it is that works for you, and just to understand that, like, you really are a unique individual, and so it is okay if something that works for somebody else doesn't work for you, and that is not indicative of how good you are or how hard you work or whatever it is. There are certain things that I too I'm not doing. I just
Yep.
listen, and then there are certain things that I do that I know that don't work for everybody. I really like the gym. I love going to the gym. Like, it's one of my favorite places, but that doesn't work for everybody else, right? And
I see
that's
people
cool.
out swimming. I'm like,
cool.
man, I've tried. I'm just not going to do it. It just bores me to tears. Other people are like, man, it's the greatest thing in the world to just be in the water. I'm like, awesome, good for you.
Well,
enjoy it. But I think you're
right. My hair would fall out. My hair would fall out if I swam every day. That chlorine is not the business for my hair, unless I can find like a saltwater pool.
That's funny.
Right.
So let's talk.
Let me ask you this.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just was curious. What would you say are some just really kind of important things in terms of trying to get started getting healthy? Some ideas, some principles, just some things that you would say, anybody who's starting their journey, this might be really good for them to know or to hear from your experience.
Yeah, I think the first one is be realistic. If you have not gone for a run in 10 years, don't sign up for the marathon. Like, just don't do it. Like, don't go out and I'm buying the shoes and I'm running the marathon. Like, no, you're okay. Like, maybe, but probably not. Right. Start where you are. Start with going for a walk. Start with moving your body regularly. Start with something that set intermediate, realistic goals. Right. I just got into Spartan racing, and I did not sign up for the ultramarathon distance first, right? Like, I signed up for the 10K distance, and I did that, and it went great, and I got some work to do before I'm ready for the next distance, and then I'll move on. I think too many of us, we set these goals that are just not reflective of our current reality, and then we get discouraged. So for me, a big principle is start where you are. Maybe have the long-term in view. Like, I'd love to do an ultra Spartan race someday, but like, maybe have that in view. But okay, let's set some intermediate goals to get us there so that we can have some easy wins and so we don't get discouraged. That'd be one thing I'd recommend to start. How about you? What's one that you would share?
Yeah, I certainly echo that start with small goals, and I'll even add to that just a little bit. If you set a goal and you're not meeting it, make the goal smaller. Make it smaller and have peace about that, right? Because again, we so want to get to the end results, and this is a marathon, right? So you have your whole life to run a Spartan, the UK Spartan, whatever it's called, that. You have your whole life to that. So if you don't do that this year, there's time, right? I think that the other thing that I've learned is that in terms of being overwhelmed by all of the options, I've learned that everything can work. And when I say everything, I mean whether you do keto or paleo or vegan. And funny enough, I was vegan for about 3 months. But anyway, all of it can work, right? Any
Yeah.
physical activity, you can swim, you can walk, you can run. I know people that are in amazing shape and all they do is walk. They don't run, they don't lift. So it can all work if you're consistent, right? So I think that like whatever you start with, I would just recommend giving it 3 months. Try that thing for 3 months to see the results, right? I know that for me, you know, people who have known me for a long time, when they see me and they haven't seen me for a year, they say wonderful things. Oh, you look so good. Oh my God, I can't believe you don't even look like the same person. But like, it has taken a full year for me to finally look in the mirror and be like, wow, you are smaller. You know, you do look different. It has taken this whole time. And so I think consistency is really important. And then I would also add, I think that you got to track and measure. You can decide what you track and measure, but that's going to be really important in terms of determining if it's actually working and motivating yourself with your progress. And finally, I think we need support. I think you need community. I am a part of an Overeaters Anonymous type of group of folks that struggle with food just like me. And the reality is that your support may not come from the folks that you're closest to, right? One of my doctors said to me, your family and friends are going to be your worst enemies on this journey. And that's been the truth. Like people, there are people who I love and who love me, who just are not helpful in this realm. They say stuff like, hey, let's go to the Cheesecake Factory. Ma'am,
Hey, here's a cinnamon roll.
I'm struggling with cheese. You know what I'm saying? Correct.
Yeah.
Bridgeway.
Yeah.
So Pastor Lance.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about this as we wrap up. I have two more topics I want to hit on. Number one, I want to talk about pitfalls that we need to be careful to avoid. And I think some are specific, some are general to any person, but I think there are some that are specific to us as Christians. Yeah. And then I want to wrap up with, let's just talk about just sharing personally, hey, what have you tried that's worked? And what have you tried that you're like, man, that's just not for me, in terms of whether it's fads or diets or exercise things or whatever. We can just end with a little bit of levity, sharing our experiences with some of those things. So first one, what do we need to be careful to avoid if we're gonna, if we're saying, I'm motivated, I'm inspired, I want to give a little bit more attention to my physical health?
Yeah. I have found that not having a plan is the worst thing in the world. And it really is a pitfall. And I think that just to not have this is what I do if I encounter this. This is what I do when I feel like this. This is to not have that, I think, is a setup for failure. And it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around because we don't have to think like that, or a lot of us haven't grown up thinking like that, right? But like when I leave the house, this is my plan for lunch. This is my plan if that plan doesn't work, right? If I leave my sandwich in the car and it gets hot and I can't eat it, this is my plan. If I get to work and Pastor Brian says, let's go, out to eat to lunch, this is the plan for how I navigate that. So I think that that's been really, really helpful and effective for me. And I think that the other thing is to have too many rules, I think is a pitfall, right? Again, when we look at all of the things that people are saying, right? Some people are really a vegetarian is the way. And if you eat meat, you're going to die. Some people are like, if you don't eat meat, you're going to just spike your blood sugar all the time, especially with those vegetables that grow above ground or below ground. And so here's the thing. I think you have to figure out like what are I call them bright lines, right? Just a couple of things that are my non-negotiables. And then everything else I plan and I think and I work through, right? So like one of my hard rules is like, I don't drink my calories. It's just a rule. I don't drink my calories. I don't drink soda. I don't drink juices. There's too many no calorie, no sugar drink options. That's one of my personal rules, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of like 3, right? Everything else that's out there, I'm relatively flexible with it. And I think that just kind of circling back to what you said about just like not being miserable, right? If
Yeah.
your plan makes you miserable, you're gonna fail, And so avoid that. Figure out how can I do this? And one of the ways that we can do that is that I use is to I honor myself all the time for my
Mm,
work, right?
yeah.
So like if we're doing something, because like just sweating and being out of breath is not pleasant. I don't care if we're dancing, jump roping, or running. Like sweating and being out of breath is not pleasant for me. But when I do it, I honor myself, right? Whether
Yeah.
that's I take a trip or I buy new gym clothes. I really have a thing for gym clothes. I love gym clothes. I buy a new product or whatever. Like I honor myself, reward myself for that work, and I think that's been really effective for me. What I will say, and this is just it's levity, but it's still the truth. Is a pitfall is just you need to understand that like the measurements for weights are different in this country than in other countries. Because I went to the UK and was like, I'm going to maintain while I'm on this trip, and they use I think what is it kilograms,
Right.
kilometer,
Yeah.
whatever
Kilograms.
they
Yeah.
use, and I translated it to pounds and almost killed myself in the gym. And especially because I was like, why can't I've lifted this 1,000 times?
Oh, that's
Why
funny.
can't I? And I almost died. So
Like, oh, wait a second.
that's something that you might want to consider too.
That's yes. Make sure you have your
What about
weight
you?
conversions. Yeah. No, I think I agree with everything you've said. I think as Christ followers, anything can be an idol, right? And an idolatry typically does not come from
That's
an
good.
overindulgence in something that is bad. It can, but that's uncommon, right? Idolatry comes from
Mm,
overindulgence in
mm,
something that is good. So if ultimately I'm finding my identity in my physical health, that
mm,
is problematic. Physical health is a wonderful thing. It is not God. It is not what makes me significant in the world. It is not the most important thing. It falls well
mm,
underneath a lot of important areas of my life, and I do think that that you see all these different documentaries and things of people that have done all these extreme physical health challenges. And on the one hand, I think it's amazing. You see the things that these people are able to accomplish. On the other hand, it just makes me wonder, like, and I mean this with as little judgment as possible, like, what's their family life like? Like, what do their kids think of all of this? Like you have to be able to balance kind of your physical health with every other element of your life. And then again, you have to be really careful not to find your identity in it because can we decrease the effects of aging by physical health? Yes. By exercise and diet? Yes. Can we eliminate them? No. Right. And then also, I
yeah,
think
you're
just the
still gonna get
practical thing.
old.
Yeah, you're still going to get old. Like that's just how it's going to go. And then I just think the practical thing, and I am terrible about this, is you just have to know your limits so you don't hurt yourself. And that's part of the like, hey, if you are completely sedentary and you're like, I'm going to go run 5 miles today, it's like you're going to hurt yourself. That is actually what is going to happen. And then with that, you try to start things that aren't sustainable. And that's where it just comes back to what we were saying earlier. Is I think being realistic. And then I think just again, as Christians, recognizing physical health is great, it is not God. And if we expect it to be what gives us value, as opposed to finding our
Absolutely.
value and our worth in our relationship with the Father, we're just going to spin ourselves in a lot of unhealthy directions. And we're really, like, as with so many other things, we're not going to find joy in it because we're asking it to do something for us that it's not designed for. So those are just some pitfalls I would say are important to avoid. So last thing, and then we gotta wrap up here. Let's just talk for a minute. What are some things, man, that you've tried that have let's focus on what are some things that you've just realized, man, this does not work for Judah Sanders. What does not work? What has not worked for you as you've been on the journey of trying to get healthy?
Yeah, I have found actually that vegan and vegetarian doesn't work for me, and not
Mm-hmm.
actually for the reasons that I think are would immediately come to mind because I'm not a very picky eater, which is actually a tremendous blessing because it has allowed the
Mm-hmm.
dietary part not to be as painful for me. But because I really love carbs, and when you don't eat meat, your diet tends to have more carbs in it, and I'm not. I'm also just not great with moderation. I'm just not. I wish I was. And so one of the things that doesn't work for me as much is this idea of that, like, oh, you can have a little bit. I think most people can. I think that's really healthy. That like you could, you occasionally have a cookie, and for most people, I would say, yeah, do that. But for me, I just am not great at moderation. I'm not going to stop at one cookie. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like I just am not. And so for me, a lot of times I have to have a harder kind of stance against things that I eat, and even with my exercise than other people, because I'm kind of an all or nothing. So that just doesn't work for me. And I've had to be honest with myself about that and grieve that, because I know a lot of other people who are extraordinarily healthy, more healthy than I am, who can have a donut, can have Starbucks, can have, can do any of that, can pick and choose when they go work out. And it's because they're better at moderation than me. So that's been a pitfall for me. I don't eat Brussels sprouts. I believe that they're the devil. And you won't convince me otherwise. They don't work for me, so I'm not eating them. And I'll say that to say that one of my rules just for my life that has allowed me to have joy in this is that like I just don't eat stuff that I don't like.
Yeah.
I don't care how healthy it is. If I don't like it, I don't eat it. It can reverse cancer, cure diabetes, make me tall, whatever. I don't eat stuff that I don't like, and I'm good with that. Yeah. For you, what are some things that you've tried that just absolutely don't work for you? And what have you tried that just really has worked for you?
Yeah, I think that, so what has is just, fun. So I think finding things that are fun, first of all, because I just like that fun. And I think for me, just setting goals has been hugely important. You talk about the 400 push-ups. It's like, okay, my goal for the day is to do 400 push-ups. Here we go. If my goal for the day is to stop periodically and do push-ups, I will do like 18 in the course of the day. I think having something to train for really, really helps. And then having specific goals, just because I like a challenge, really, really, really helps me. And I think also just sort of picking and choosing, okay, what is going to be my area of focus right now in terms of my health? I can't focus on everything. So I want to do some things focus on things that I like and focus on things that are going to be beneficial. Things I found that just don't work, like, in this, COVID season where all the gyms are closed, I'm doing a lot of different, computer-based workouts, but like, Shanti, God bless him, it's just too much, man. Just can't do it. Like I got about 7 days into one of these programs. I'm like, I'm sure are a very nice person and you are very fit, but I want to die every time I look at you. And the thing is, it's like, I'm just like, okay, some people can do that and it works for them and that's awesome, but it doesn't work for me. And it is what it is. And I think that, it's just such a theme throughout this episode has been that idea of when it comes to diet, when it comes to exercise, are there principles? Of course there are. But within those principles, you have to find what works for you, and you need to not be threatened by what works or doesn't work for somebody else. So I think if we can do that, if we can invite God into the process where we allow our pursuit of physical health to be an act of worship and to be something that we use to connect with him, which it has absolutely been in the course of my life, it can be something sustainable and joyful and fun and not just this like miserable, constant boot camp deprivation, Brussels sprouts and plain quinoa type experience, right? Yeah. No good.
There's no God in that.
That's right. Well, hey, thank you, Judah, for your time today, man. It was so fun to connect and to talk through some of this stuff. I know that obviously a lot of us are thinking about physical health and mental health and spiritual health in the midst of all of this. So, man, appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your insights.
Yeah, man. So glad to be on here and just my heart is for all of us to be as healthy as we can, for us to feel good and to walk through life just right smack dab in the middle of God's purpose. This is a part of how we do it.
Amen. All right. And thanks to all you for listening. Thanks to Lucian and Brenton, who will take the audio and video and make us look good and sound good. And we'll be back with you in another couple weeks for another episode of Engaging Culture. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Engaging Culture, a podcast by Bridgeway Christian Church. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing and leaving a review on iTunes. Thank you so much for listening. Music is used under the Creative Commons license and is provided by Dexter Britton.